Welcome back to another episode of the Simone NBA show brought to you by Heavy Sports. I'm your host, Jack Simone. You can follow me on Twitter at JackSimoneNBA. You can follow Heavy on Twitter at HeavyOnSports. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can follow Heavy at all of their other platforms, which is to my left, right. It's on the side of the screen. You'll see it there. But thank you for all the support on the last episode with the Grant Williams interview. That was awesome. I had a blast. And again, thank you to eBay and Grant's team for helping set that up. But we're going to dive into some new news here, and we're going to start with the Christmas Day slate. Shams Charania of The Athletic reporting that the NBA has announced their Christmas Day slate. For the upcoming season, we have Bucks at Celtics, 76ers at Knicks, Suns at Nuggets, Lakers at Mavericks, and Grizzlies at Warriors. All these games sound like primetime NBA television, which is exactly what they want on Christmas Day. So we're just going to run down the list quick, talk a little bit about each of them, then we'll get into some other news. But first one, Bucks at Celtics. Makes a ton of sense. They played actually last year on Christmas as well, but with their rivalry in the playoffs, it just makes sense to run it back, I guess. They're two of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. A lot of people saying, oh, the Bucks would have beat the Celtics if Chris Middleton was healthy. That might be true. We won't know. Injuries happen every year. The Celtics, were the better team this year because Chris Middleton was out. If Chris Middleton was there, maybe the Bucks would, or maybe the Celtics would still, but it's a closer series, even though it already won 7. Regardless, this should be a great matchup. Celtics re-upped. They brought in Malcolm Brogdon, Danilo Gallinari. The Bucks will presumably have Chris Middleton back, sign Joe Ingles. Perfect Christmas Day game. 2 elite teams, big market. Celtics in Boston, perfect game. Next, 76ers at Knicks. James Harden actually kind of leaked this one before anybody else did, I think it was in his Instagram story saying they're going to have Christmas at the Garden, Madison Square Garden. 76ers traveling to New York to play the Knicks. Knicks right now, big 3, Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, RJ Barrett. Will Donovan Mitchell be there? Who knows? If he does, it'll make it for a better game. Anyways, 76ers, obviously, Harden, Embiid, that's all you need. Maybe they get KD too. We'll talk about that a bit later. But two of the biggest markets in the NBA. This makes a ton of sense as well. Next, you have Suns at Nuggets. 2 smaller market teams, but both are very good. You have the star power there. Christmas in Denver, 2-time MVP Nikola Jokic, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, just 2 good teams going to go at it. Makes sense. Lakers at Mavs makes sense too. LeBron James versus Luka Doncic. Probably 2 of the biggest names in the NBA right now. I would say 2 top 3 biggest names, top 5 biggest names up there. In Dallas though, so not in LA, but still 2 big name teams going at it. And then Grizzlies Warriors. This is the one most people are most excited for, I would assume. Have the beef from all last season. Draymond Green and John Morant talking about it on Twitter. All love, nothing disrespectful, but they asked for this. A lot of people saying, oh, Memphis would never get a Christmas Day game. The market's too small, but boom, here it is. Grizzlies going to Golden State to take on the Warriors there. It's great. The one thing I've seen on Twitter, people complaining about, I think there was, maybe it was Ira Winderman, some Heat reporter or insider said, all of the top 8 teams from the playoffs last year got a Christmas Day game except for the Heat, which is kind of bogus. I'll give them that. But at the same time, what team do you take out for the Heat? The only ones I could argue was you take out one of the Suns or Nuggets and you find it like Heat Nuggets maybe would have been better than Suns Nuggets. But then that's not both on the West Coast, so they're traveling for... it's weird. You can't take out the Lakers. The Knicks, I guess you could take out. You do 76ers Heat, but Knicks, probably the biggest market in the world in New York. You can't really take them off, so it's tough that the Heat got snubbed again. But you can't really have a Christmas Day game in Miami because, no offense to Miami, but that arena is just not as poppin' as the rest of these, right? Like when it gets loud, it gets loud. But half the time, even in the playoffs against the Celtics, I watched all those games, TD Garden was 10 times louder than FTX Arena. It's just how Miami is. The Heat aren't the main attraction in Miami. It's the clubs and it's the bars, and that's what it is. So it sucks that the Heat didn't get a Christmas Day game because they're going to be amazing. But it's the nature of the beast, I suppose. So I'm looking forward to all these games. I think it'll be a good one. Interesting to see the Nets didn't get one. That tells you the NBA is not sure enough if they'll have KD, Kyrie, so they kind of left them off anyways. And if the Knicks get Donovan Mitchell, then that'll be even better. But even if not, it's New York, so people will watch. So that's what Christmas Day is looking like this year. Next, we have some original reporting from Steve Bulpett of Heavy.com on Jaylen Brown, as if you're not sick of hearing about Jaylen Brown and Kevin Durant anymore. Talking about how Jaylen is all in on the Celtics. Bulpett spoke to sources, one of them saying, I think Jaylen is long-term. If they want him long-term, then they're going to pay him the contract he deserves. I think he's all in on Boston. From everything I've been told, Jaylen's a loyal guy. I know frustration can happen when things aren't going well, and I think we all saw some of that earlier in this past season, but when you take a step back and look at things, I think he wants to be there, and any problems that could ever happen with the relationship would probably have to come from him getting the idea that they're not in on him, and right now I don't see that from the Celtics. I think they know what they have in Jaylen now and for the future, and they want to keep that going. So that said, he also said, but like I said, it's Kevin effing Durant. Brooklyn's going to want to talk about Jaylen, blah, blah, blah. It's going to come up. Nothing you've seen from the Celtics side of things, and when you say Celtics side of things, you have to understand that these reports are coming from different anonymous quote-unquote executives. Like Shams reporting that Jaylen Brown was thrown in a deal probably came from the Nets side of things because they want Jaylen Brown in a deal and they want to, sever that relationship he has with the Celtics. And these reports from Bulpett are probably coming from the Celtics side of things. Like maybe this was Brad Stevens. Maybe this was somebody from the Celtics front office saying, hey, let the media know, like, we're in contact with Jaylen. Like, you've heard all these reports saying the Celtics have talked to Jaylen Brown. Like you saw a report saying Brad Stevens and Ime Udoka have kept Brown in the loop. This isn't just something they're doing behind his back. Like he knows everything that's going on, and you have to assume based on these reports they still have a good relationship with Jaylen. Does that mean they didn't? Does that mean that they left his name out of trade talks? No, absolutely not. Like there's a chance they go to the Nets and say, hey, we don't know what you're talking about, and with these Marcus Smart, Derek White things or the picks, blah, blah, blah. We don't know why you're leaking these rumors. Like, stop doing that. But if you're the Celtics and the Nets are like, okay, we'll take Jaylen Brown and 2 picks. I mean, like, there has to be a line. Because obviously, when Kevin Durant became available and when he requested a trade from the Nets, every team in the NBA gave a call. Every team picked up the phone and said, hey, do you think we have a chance? Like, is there a package? Blah, blah, blah. And the Celtics are one of those teams that does have a chance. Jaylen Brown is probably the single best player the Nets could get back in a Kevin Durant trade right now. More on that later. But you look at the other teams that have been mentioned earlier in the stages of the rumors. Tyler Hero, not as good as Jaylen Brown. DeAndre Ayton, not as good as Jaylen Brown. And he can't even be included anymore. The only person that would probably trump Brown in those rumors is Bam Adebayo, and the Nets can't acquire him without trading away Ben Simmons. And even if they were willing to do that, there's no guarantee that the Heat would trade Bam Adebayo, and I don't think that would be a thing either. But hearing from the Celtics side of things that Jaylen is all in on the Celtics, and I would assume vice versa, it leads you to believe that there's some counter reporting here. The Celtics are saying, okay, let's get something out there because the Nets are just spewing all of this from our talks, and it's like all this half-true information. Like the Nets releasing that the Celtics quote-unquote offered Jaylen Brown could just then be like Celtics saying, oh, what if what if we included Jaylen Brown in a deal? What would you think? And the Nets came back with some offer, and the Celtics said no, and that was them quote-unquote offering it. Like you don't know how these rumors and this reporting works. So to hear that Jaylen Brown is all in on Boston is great. It didn't come from Jaylen Brown, so that is a little bit more like, okay, it's just more rumors, and that's all it is at this point. And that's all you can expect in the offseason. But to know that the counter reporting is there should give Celtics fans at least some comfort that it's not definitely going to happen. But hey, if you're a Celtics fan that wants Kevin Durant, also know that this doesn't mean much of anything in the grand scheme of trades. If a trade's going to happen, it's still going to happen. This is just saying, okay, Jaylen is at least in a good standing with the Celtics right now, based on the report. So, reporting from Steve Bulpett of Heavy.com, Celtics and Jaylen are supposedly on good terms still. Keeping with the Kevin Durant saga, Mark Stein, longtime NBA reporter, writes for the Stein Line now, his own newsletter. Check it out. Reported on August 15th, the day I'm recording this, during Summer League in Las Vegas, one of the most well-connected team executives I speak to regularly insisted to me that based on what he was hearing, Kevin Durant was more apt to retire than play again for the Brooklyn Nets, and that was in early July. Mark Stein followed that up by saying, I told the guy who told me I couldn't believe that. I was a loyal subscriber to the theory that Durant the Hooper loves playing, blah, blah, blah. It's a weird situation, thinking that Kevin Durant would retire before playing for the Nets. But at the same time, it's hard to believe that. I talked to Keith Smith of Celtics Blog and the Spot Track on my Celtics podcast from the rafters, and he said, it's looking like the Nets don't want to go into training camp with KD. And all these people saying KD is a quote-unquote real hooper and would play for the Nets no matter what. Keith basically explained that, I mean, Kevin Durant doesn't need the money. He's not like he doesn't need to go to camp to get this money. He makes enough off the court, and he has made enough throughout his career that he wouldn't need to do that. He could hold out on the Nets, and the theory that he wouldn't because he's a quote-unquote real hooper is a bit... Keith didn't say this, but I'll say it. It's a bit silly, right? Like if Kevin Durant doesn't want to play there, he's not going to play there. And he's shown that he doesn't really care what people think. He's willing to do whatever he wants to do and what he believes is best for his career. And that's, if that's sitting out, he'll do that. But where things get interesting, excuse me, about the report of Durant potentially retiring is the man himself. Kevin Durant, being Kevin Durant, responded to this on Twitter. He didn't at Mark Stein or anything like that, but he said, "I know most people will believe unnamed sources over me, but if it's anyone out there that'll listen, I don't plan on retiring anytime soon. This, different wording, is comical at this point." So it doesn't sound like Kevin Durant will be retiring. No hate to Mark Stein. Obviously, he's just reporting what somebody told him, and he said he wouldn't believe it himself. And it does sound a bit far-fetched that KD would retire before playing for the Nets again. But you have to think about the future, because this situation seems bad for both Kevin Durant and the Nets, right? It's clear at this point that neither side really wants anything to do with the other side. But KD has 4 years left on his deal, and the Nets want this massive return in exchange for him. Reports saying that they're willing to take, they want to take every last asset, quote unquote, from any team they make a Durant deal with. And right now that's only one of 4 or 5 teams. Like you look at Philadelphia, who we'll talk about momentarily, Boston, Miami, Phoenix, kind of, and Toronto is still out there. And then New Orleans also came up as a potential destination. I mean, they could probably provide as good a package as the Celtics, but the issue there is, would KD want to play in New Orleans? And that's where you get into the tricky situation from their perspective, at least. But yeah, it's looking like KD's not going to retire. I mean, him saying that on Twitter is as good as, good as gold. He's not going anywhere. But the fact that it's reported that that's how badly, the retiring part is probably a bit of an exaggeration, but that should tell you how much KD doesn't want to play for the Nets. Take the word retire out of it, and that's just a testament to how done he is with Brooklyn. And I would imagine how done Brooklyn is with him, because you see Josiah on Twitter saying, "We back our GM, we back our coach." It seems like this is an untenable situation at this point, and we're just waiting for a trade to be made. Whether that trade will be made before the season starts is unknown. But again, I spoke with Keith Smith on my podcast from the Rafters about it, and he says there's kind of a soft deadline on this. If this doesn't get done by training camp, we're going to run into even more issues. So if I were to guess, and this isn't from Keith or Mark Stein or anything, this is coming from my not sourced mouth, I would guess Kevin Durant's traded by training camp, because I just don't think that either team wants to move forward past that with him on the roster. And it's either going to be a team overpaying for him, or not even overpaying, meeting the Nets asking price because they're desperate by that point to get a deal done, or the Nets coming down on their asking price a tiny bit and trading him for less than they think he's worth. So we'll see what happens, but one of those things I think is bound to happen by training camp. Next, I wanted to touch on the idea of Kevin Durant being traded to the 76ers, because I just think it's really interesting. You had the report come out from Ian Begley of SNY saying that Philadelphia is on Durant's list, or metaphorical list of preferred destinations. Ramona Shelburne reporting that KD and James Harden are on good terms now. Obviously, I mean, if you're on Twitter, you saw Kevin Durant and James Harden at the Travis Scott concert together, so they're obviously cool enough to go hang out in public together, which is crazy to think about, because just some odd months ago at the All-Star draft, you had Kevin Durant purposely avoiding drafting James Harden to his team, LeBron James laughing at him, Kevin Durant making a stern face. It was clear that the relationship was severed at that point, but this many months later, to see them just out in public at concerts together, hanging out as buddies, is a bit weird. And now that KD is on the trade block, I think the Philadelphia package is a lot more enticing than a lot of people think. I've seen some mixed reactions on it, and one of the main things is that, any Kevin Durant deal to Philadelphia would have to include Tobias Harris. And he has 2 years left on his deal, and would the Nets be willing to take on 2 years of Tobias Harris in a Kevin Durant deal? Probably not, right? That's rough. Plus, Philadelphia doesn't have the picks. They just don't have a lot of picks, if any picks, to trade in that deal. So it's not the best deal that could potentially be out there. But that's the key word, is potentially. The key to the Philadelphia trade is Tyrese Maxey. Is Tyrese Maxey the best prospect that's going to be available in a Kevin Durant trade? Maybe. And that's not saying Tyrese Maxey is better than Jaylen Brown, but at the end of the day, is Boston willing to trade Jaylen Brown? That's a question. That's a question. You hear them say, oh, they offered him already, blah, blah, blah. You don't know that. We'll never know that. We'll never know if they're going back on their word, if they ever truly offered him in the first place. You don't know. Tyler Hero versus Tyrese Maxey. That's a question, right? Like who would the Nets prefer? Tyler Hero's the better player at this point, but who's going to be the better player long term? That could be a debate. I mean, I would probably lean Tyler Hero still, but that's definitely a debate to have. Plus, after that, like Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and like a couple like picks, like versus Tobias Harris, Matisse Thybulle, Tyrese Maxey, and other assets the 76ers can muster up. Like that could be in debate. That could also be a debate that's they're willing to have. Phoenix, I guess, if they're willing to make the move, I'd probably take Mikal Bridges over. I would take Mikal Bridges over either Tyler Hero, or Tyrese Maxey. But the Nets might not. Maybe they value the scoring. Maybe they want this high scoring guard that they can build around rather than this, as of now, defensive minded, role player. Elite role player at that, who you don't really know if he could grow into a bigger role. I think Mikal Bridges could thrive in a larger role in Brooklyn, but right now it looks like he's the perfect fourth man on a title contender, which is good, which is fine. That's like perfect role for him right now. But I don't think you should turn your head up at the notion that Philadelphia could get seriously involved with the Kevin Durant saga, because I think it's a real possibility. They'd probably need a third team to come in there. Give up a couple picks for who knows what. Maybe they add a third team in there. They give up a veteran or two or a young player or something for a pick, and they trade that to Brooklyn to entice them even more. But I don't think Philadelphia should be completely counted out. It's going to be tough because I think there are potentially better offers that could be given to the Nets. But the question is, are those other teams willing to offer those potential offers? So don't turn your head up at the KD package. I think a Maxey, Harris, Thybulle, and other trade package could be enough if no other team is willing to bite on the Nets' high asking price. But we shall see. Again, we won't know anything until it happens. But don't completely turn your head up at Philadelphia. I think there's a sneaky chance that they could land Kevin Durant. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about the Lakers. Reports coming out from Dan Woik, gonna say that wrong, I'm sorry, of the LA Times, saying that the Lakers insist, or sources close to the Lakers insist that they have other trade options outside of a Kyrie Irving deal or Buddy Hield / Miles Turner, trade from the Pacers. The quote saying, if and when KD and Donovan Mitchell get traded, the space to make a Westbrook trade probably opens a little wider with the cost getting cleared. Lakers sources insist they have options beyond the ones that have been reported: Irving, Buddy Hield, Miles Turner, and others. Time should better reveal those once the bigger moves get made. I think it's funny that Lakers sources are insisting, no, we have other things, guys. Don't worry. That's kind of like when you're in elementary school and you say you have a girlfriend or boyfriend, you go, oh, no, you don't know them. They go to another school. Like, yeah, no, trust me. It exists. They just go to another school. That's like what it sounds like. And it's very possible because I personally think there are other options out there than the Kyrie and Pacers deals. But it's just funny to see that Lakers sources saying, oh, yeah, no, the Lakers definitely have options, guys. Don't worry. They definitely have other things they can do. Don't worry. It's definitely a thing can happen. It kind of reeks of desperation, in my opinion. Obviously, they could go into the season with Westbrook, and they'd probably be fine. Does fine mean they're a playoff team? I don't know, but it means that it can't be much worse than last season. But I think in order for them to be a playoff team, let alone a title contender, which I don't even know if they can get to that point, they need to deal Westbrook for depth. I think the days of Kyrie Irving, LeBron, and AD plus random roster pieces being enough to win it all, I don't think that's a thing. I don't think. I think star power is starting to matter less and less in today's NBA. Yes, it matters, and yes, you need a star to win a championship. But you can't just throw 3 stars on a team with random pieces behind them and expect it to work. Those days are over. You saw that with the Lakers. You saw that with the Nets. That is how it works. You look at the best teams in the NBA right now, it is stars with depth. The Boston Celtics, Tatum and Brown, stars, depth. Smart, Robert Williams, Al Horford, Malcolm Brogdon now, Derek White. Warriors, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins. Stars, right? Depth. Jordan Poole, Jonathan Kuminga, who barely even played. Otto Porter last year, Gary Payton last year, Bielitsa. They had great depth. Grizzlies, depth, right? Heat, the epitome of depth. Dallas Mavericks, sneaky depth with Luka Doncic at the helm. There's a lot of teams in the NBA nowadays that are stars with depths, and that is the recipe to winning nowadays, in my opinion. And for that reason, I think the best Westbrook trade they could possibly do is with the Utah Jazz. Excuse me. The question is whether the Jazz would be interested in this sort of thing. I'll lay it out here. I think how do I want to put this first? I think the Lakers should trade Russell Westbrook, Talon Horton-Tucker, their 27 and 29 firsts to the Jazz for Conley, Bojan Bogdanovic, Patrick Beverley, and one of Jordan Clarkson or Malik Beasley. That is 4 borderline starter level. I don't even know if borderline is necessary. 4 starting level players in exchange for Westbrook, THT, and 2 first-round picks. And the reason the Jazz do that, because it obviously sounds like a lot, is Conley, they need to get off his money. Maybe they can find another package, but Lakers first-round picks that far in advance, that's pretty valuable, plus THT. Bojan Bogdanovic is an expiring deal. I think they'd be lucky to get a second for him, and similar to the Evan Fournier contract that the Celtics got for 2 seconds from the Magic a couple years ago. So throwing him in this shouldn't be a big deal. And then Patrick Beverley and one of Malik Beasley or Jordan Clarkson. That's where the bulk of the value in this deal would be, and I think you get that back in THT and a first-round pick. So you break it up, and I think that's worth it. And then you trade the other one of Beasley or Clarkson for another first or another first and a second or something from another team that wants that. But at that point, the Lakers could roll out a starting lineup of Mike Conley, Patrick Beverley, or Malik Beasley. Let's say Patrick Beverley can be the 6th man, or maybe Conley can be the 6th man. Maybe they run Patrick Beverley, Malik Beasley, LeBron James, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Anthony Davis. Or maybe they don't want to play Davis at the center and they bring Bojan Bogdanovic off the bench and start Thomas Bryant. But that exactly what I just said is the point. They have options if they make that deal. If they make this deal, they have options of different lineups they can run. They don't have to be stuck with, okay, something's not working, let's throw Troy Brown Jr. in there. Let's throw Austin Reeves in there. And it's not a slight on Brown Jr. or Austin Reeves. They're both solid enough players, but every player in this deal is capable of being a starter on a playoff team. And having options at that point would be huge for the Lakers. So I think I would take that deal even over anything else on the market, over Buddy Hield, Miles Turner, over Kyrie Irving. I think Russ, THT, 2 first-round picks, maybe even a second if the Jazz are being stingy, which, it's day and age, so maybe. For Conley, Bogdanovic, Patrick Beverley, and then either Malik Beasley or Jordan Clarkson, I think that's the trade. I think that's the one that the Lakers need to do. So whether or not that's on the table, who knows? But I think they approach the Jazz and they work something out and get, if they can't even get 4, even 3 of those players, I think would be worth it for them. So I think that's where they need to attack the trade market for Westbrook, because then the Jazz could just buy Westbrook out or wait the 1 year and let him go. And that's essentially just an expiring contract at that point. And those 27 and 29 Lakers first have the potential to be seriously, seriously valuable. And THT, I mean, he's a throw and he could turn into something with extra minutes in Utah. Who knows? But I think that's the trade for LA. And lastly, in Jack's Corner, I want to talk about the Dallas Mavericks, because I feel like a lot of the conversation around the Mavericks this summer has been they lost Jalen Brunson. Excuse me, they are going to be worse. And I don't think that's the case. Whether or not they'll be better, and as in, better being make the finals, I don't know, because I think there's some tough competition in the West. But I do think they need to be in that upper echelon of teams in the West. I think they are in the same tier as the Warriors, as the Clippers, as the whatever teams. I think they are a top tier team in the West. I think they will be a 50-win team with these. I think they will be a top 4 team in the West. I think they are that good still, even with losing Jaylen Brunson, and here's why. Luka Doncic is Luka Doncic. Having him is going to be a guaranteed playoff spot, like having LeBron for the majority of his career, excuse me, up until the last few years, was a guaranteed playoff spot. You replace Jaylen Brunson's production with Spencer Dinwiddie, who steps up into a larger role. You replace Spencer Dinwiddie's production with Tim Hardaway Jr., who was out for the majority of the season that people seem to forget about. Plus, you add in great front court depth now. JaVale McGee signing, I think, flew a little bit under the radar is what I'm trying to say. I think he's the perfect center to pair with Luka Doncic. Yes, he's on the back end of his career, so he's not going to be as effective as he once was, but at the bare bones level, he is a solid defensive center, and he is somebody who can catch lobs from Luka. And I think he'll be a star in his role for the Mavericks. I think he'll probably average something along the lines of maybe 9 points, 7 rebounds, and a block and a half, which is exactly what you need from him. And then there's Christian Wood, who will probably start at the power forward or start at center. I think they should start him at center and run. I think they should start JaVale. That was a weird signing of JaVale after the Wood addition because I thought they'd play Wood at center, but I do like the pairing if they can get Christian Wood to be an effective power forward. So I think you run Wood at the power forward. He'll be your secondary scorer on the roster, and that's even with Dinwiddie and Hardaway Jr., who are 2 solid scorers there as well. You still have DFS. You still have Reggie Bullock, Kleber. You still have Powell for depth. You have Josh Green, who I am higher on than most people, I think, as an underrated defender. Berton's there for some shooting. I think this roster is capable of making the finals. Whether or not they will because of the competition, I don't know, but I think they are a top 4 team in the West. And that's without these sneaky additions they've made at the bottom of their roster, right? Like Jaden Hardy, he's a very raw prospect. I don't think he'll get huge minutes, but he has the chance to make a name for himself. Like, same thing with McKinley Wright, who they just signed to a training camp deal. I think they're making the right decisions around Luka. They don't have a very young, roster right now around Luka, but they're taking chances on the right guys. Jaden Hardy, picked him up, traded into the draft to grab him. McKinley Wright, they just signed him a training camp deal. Muhammadu Gueye, and I'm gonna butcher that last name, but he was the defensive player of the year at the Atlantic East Conference, went undrafted, plays for Pitt. He can shoot the 3, and he's a great defender on the interior. Great pickup on a training camp deal. They're making the right moves at the back end of the roster to support Luka's future while also putting a quality team right now around him to succeed. And the idea that depth wins in the NBA is going to be screamed to the heavens by the Dallas Mavericks because they have a legitimate 10-man rotation. It's just not as star-studded as some of the other ones around the league, right? Like, you could roll out a starting lineup of, let's just say they roll out a starting lineup of Luka Doncic, Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, Christian Wood, JaVale McGee. That still leaves you with Tim Hardaway Jr., Reggie Bullock, Maxi Kleber, and Dwight Powell off the bench. Like, they have serious depth, and that's without even mentioning their 10th man, who could be anybody of Davis Bertans, Jaden Hardy, Josh Green, Franklin Aquila. Like, they have a legitimate rotation off the bench. I don't even know if I said Dwight Powell. That could contend for a title because Luka Doncic makes everybody around him better. Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to be coming back. Spencer Dinwiddie is going to be stepping up. I think people are sleeping on the Dallas Mavericks. I think they slept on them last year. I had them beating the Suns in 7. I called it from the get-go. I actually had them beating the Warriors too. That obviously didn't work out, but don't sleep on the Dallas Mavericks. Just because they lost Jaylen Brunson doesn't mean they're going to be worse. I think they'll be even better than last year. Watch out. Luka could be coming for MVP. Dallas is on the up and up. And that is going to be it for this episode of the Simone NBA Show. Thank you all for listening as always. And again, thank you for all the support on the Grant Williams interview. That was awesome, and I appreciated how much support I got on that. Thank you to Heavy, obviously, for sponsoring the show. Make sure to check out Heavy on Twitter at Heavy on Sports. Check me out on Twitter at JackSimoneNBA. I write for Heavy. I write for Celtics. Well, I got the Hive as well, but check out all my work everywhere. Check out all Heavy socials, which is on the side of the screen right now. I'm going to butcher which side of the screen to point on. But check us out on YouTube as well. Subscribe to Heavy. Subscribe to the show there. And yeah, I appreciate you all, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.